Okay, let's get started. Going to present my screen here. At any point, if you have questions, please post those in the chat box and then I'll add those. All right, so today's lesson is about narrative writing, and your first assignment is going to consist of a personal narrative, and this personal narrative is going to be 4 pages, and you're going to wonder, well, I don't have 4 pages to talk about, all of myself, and you're probably wondering, but there are certain things that you can do to make that happen, and of course, I'm going to give you some pre-writing options so that you do get there. Okay. So let's get started. The rhetorical mode narrative, it's just the purpose of it is to tell a story. So let's do that. Narrative writing tells a story, whether it's fictional or nonfiction. All right. So there's 2 types. One is completely fictional, all made up. You thought about a story and thinking about it. You made up all the characters, their conversations, their situations. Okay. And then there's a personal story, a personal narrative. It's a true story about an event that happened in your life, and you're wanting to tell or retell this story for someone to learn something from it, or for just simply reflection. But it's based on a true event. Okay. What you will be writing is a personal narrative. Okay. This is what we're looking for. And so I've assigned some readings for this week and last week that I would like for you to read as writers. We're no longer reading to see, oh, this is a nice little story, I like it. We're no longer reading that way. We are reading to see what writers are doing to make things happen in the text, to make reactions happen in the text, to get reactions from the readers. All right. So there are 5 things that you need to do in a narrative that will help you, have a good piece of writing. First is engage and orient the reader. And that's like establishing your character, establishing, the world that you are living in that point in time, if it's a personal narrative, or even if it's a fictional book, the first chapter is usually the longest chapter or the most boring, because all the characters and situations are being introduced, all the conflicts. But once you get through that first chapter, things start to pick up. Okay. Use narrative techniques, use a variety of transitional words to help you move forward in the story, use precise words, and provide a conclusion that reflects. Okay, so we're going to go over these one at a time, so I won't spend too much time there. How can I still use narrative techniques and still have a well-structured sequence of events? All right, and you want to have a sequence of events, just the order of events that are happening in the story, but still have those techniques in there. All right, so the first one is engage your reader. And by engage, I mean hook them. Have something that's going to grab their attention and then carry them through the rest of the story. Okay, there's nothing worse than reading a boring story. Engage the reader from the beginning. What is it? Something relevant to them, or something just really, really engaging. And second, orient. Think of the word orient as an orientation. So before you get lost, here's the information, okay? That's what you're doing. You're orienting the reader. By establishing context, point of view, introducing characters, narrators or narrator, organizing your event, and then the sequence should flow naturally from one event to the next, okay? One thing to the next, not, in chunks and pieces. Nobody wants to read something so confusing that way. Put it into context. What's happening in your world, or in that world that you're creating or recreating. Right, so one thing you can do is follow a chronological order. Introduce characters and settings, time and place. Okay, so at the beginning, that's what you want to do. Introduce the characters and the setting. Second, start with the events. Maybe some events happened, okay? Use descriptive details to keep the events progressing forward. Some of your narratives are going to be based on objects that are, symbols in your life, or they're going to be based on a person that's important in your life. But you should always have some kind of event happening or moving forward, some timeline happening. And if this person came into your life at the beginning of your, influencing into early college or something like that, then that person, it's going to stick through the rest of the narrative. It's got to be an element that's going to tie the whole story together. Okay. And then the events that happen. Okay. What was it symbolic for you to have that object in your life, and so on and so forth. And then the end result. Why is this story worth telling? What's the reflection? What's the lesson to be learned? Okay. So if it's a story that follows a sequence of events, or if it's a story that's pieced together by objects and people in your life, then it still needs to progress. And from the beginning, the middle, and the end, it needs to make sense for the reader. Okay. There are some points to consider. Do you want to go in chronological order from the beginning? How far are you going to go back to where you were born, or just a moment in time where you made a crucial decision in your life that changed your life forever? Or will you use cause and effect? You made a decision in your life and then there was consequences, the effects of that. Okay, so how will you decide to organize your paper? That is completely up to you. Those are some things you should consider when you're starting to write your own. Point of view, are you going to tell the whole story in I, we did this, move forward here, there? Or are you going to use you in trying to reach out to the narrator? To the reader. If you're going to use you, make sure that it's engaging. Some readers will not connect what you're saying, okay? So I would not use you unless it's like some, hypothetical scenarios. But if this is a personal narrative, I recommend the first person or any of these two. Third person limited, that's you knowing everything about your own character. You know everything that happened, how you felt, how you saw things. And then the second one here, the third person omniscient, that means that you know everyone's thoughts, all the characters' thoughts, that you've gone back in time and you've asked your parents, when this happened, how did you feel? Or you observe, when this happened, my sister felt this way. Okay. And so that means that you know what all the characters are thinking and doing and acting. Okay. So I recommend for a personal narrative, either first person, third person limited, or third person omniscient. I would stay away from this one. Okay. Okay. Use techniques such as dialogue, pacing, and description to develop experiences, events, and other characters. All right. So one thing that I want to focus on today is dialogue. All right. And dialogue is when two characters are having a conversation. When a writer is trying to tell a story, bringing it to life, they want to include, sorry, I went too far. They want to include conversations that the characters are having, because, it's so easy to say, well, she said this and then he said that, but that becomes boring. When the writer uses dialogue, they want us to experience. It's like we were right there in the room and we heard everything. We saw it firsthand. We heard everything that happened between the two characters. So that's why you want to bring in dialogue, to bring those characters to life. You can set it off by using quotation marks to indicate this is what the character said, and this is where he ended what he said. And then use commas inside the quotations to indicate who said what. Sometimes you'll say, Mark said, or Miss Alina said, okay? And then you'll have those commas. So it looks something like this. I'm sorry. Here, Shane, this is the text that we read for homework by Dick Gregory. He drops that. He said, she said, okay? But I'll show you why in just a minute. I was shaking, scared to death. The teacher opened her book and started calling out names alphabetically. So here he indicates that the teacher is about to talk, calling names. Helen Tucker. So we get the sense that the teacher called out the name. My daddy said he'd give $2.50. So because there's a name here, Gregory doesn't find it useful to say or repeat Helen said, Helen answered. He just assumes that the reader is following that Helen is the one that's responding. All right. Then the teacher responds again, that's very nice, Helen. See, he then assures us that it was, in fact, Helen that said that. Very nice indeed. So now we know that that's the teacher talking. Notice how he doesn't say he said, she said, because he pre-established who's talking. Okay. Now, what I like about this is that he brought those characters to life. He could have very boringly said, the teacher called out names. Helen Tucker said this. And that's it. No action. We weren't there. We just secondhand heard it. All right. But because he put in dialogue, now we experience the interchange between the characters. We were there. We saw the teacher opening her book and call out names. Okay. So this is how writers bring stories to life using these elements. So when you read, pay attention to these things. It's no longer about what happened in the story. It's now about how did this author bring this story to life? Here's another example of back and forth conversations. Here, and I like his style. This is based on style, really. He doesn't say that again. Richard said this, Richard said that, because he includes the name in the conversation, so you get the sense that who is talking. Here the narrator says, I stood up and raised my hand. What is it now? You forgot me. She turned toward the blackboard. I don't have time to be playing with you, Richard. Okay, so here we see an interchange. He doesn't, Gregory doesn't say he said, she said. We know that the speaker, the narrator is talking first, or he raised his hand and then the teacher, called on him. And then here this description becomes really important, even though it's not about he said or she said. It becomes really important because it tells us the attitude the teacher had. It's like when you're in class and you're talking and the teacher just turns around and continues what she's doing. Turns around and starts writing on the board. It shows no interest. The teacher is not interested or is ready to move on. And here we know that she's not interested. I don't have time to be playing with you, Richard. Right? So completely uninterested. Then notice how the author sets the rest of the conversation in new paragraphs. That's to indicate and to bring attention to this conversation. My daddy said he is interrupted by the teacher. Sit down, Richard, you're disturbing the class. And he continues. My daddy said he'd give $15. So here you see, we assume that Richard is saying this because then the teacher says Richard. So you see how Gregory doesn't find the need to provide as Richard said. The teacher said, boring. He's using the names within the dialogue to indicate what's happening. So we were there. We were truly in that moment right there, right? In that conversation without the other descriptions that indicate who said what. We saw it. She turned around and looked mad. We're collecting this money for you and your kind, Rich Gregory. If your daddy can give $15, you have no business being on relief. Okay, so this very humiliating incident that happened to him, he's allowed us, the narrator or the speaker or the writer has allowed us to experience with him what happened, what she said, quote unquote. This is what the teacher said. Okay, so he did this by using dialogue. Now we understand what kind of teacher is this, right? How does she feel about him? Okay, so by allowing us to experience this moment through the dialogue, we can see the type of teacher that he has and what she thinks about him. And she called him your kind, you and your kind, right? As kind of a put down. And of course, this is happening, I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, maybe this is happening like in the 1930s. Dick Gregory, he was comedian in the 1960s or so. So I imagine that he was, 7 years old around late 1920s, early 1930s or something like that. So he's a child then. And at that point in time, for African Americans, things were rather difficult in that sense. You can stop using their names each time when they talk back and forth right away, right? Because especially if you're using the name within the dialogue there, okay? For continued talking, No capital letter if you continued after you write, I said, or he said. Sir, I said to the officer, the kid just broke his arm. Right. So here this narrator stops, the writer makes a pause and then interrupts with this description. Sometimes that's important to put things into context. Who is he talking to? Okay. Then you put the comma in, and then the kid just broke his arm. Continues. No need for a capital letter here because it's a continuation of this. All right. Okay. Now we move into the narrative vocabulary. When you are telling your story, you may want to use techniques such as flashback. And flashback is important because sometimes you'll have to go back in time and retell something, that a detail or something that you might have missed or that it's important. In this case, be careful with the flashbacks, how you set them up, because if you don't give enough details, you're going to lose your audience. Remember to orient the reader. And then foreshadowing, those are just simple little hints and clues that are foretelling events that are coming up in the story. So here's an example of a flashback and a foreshadow from the same story, shame. I never learned hate at home or shame. I had to go to school for that. I was about 7 years old when I got my first big lesson. So here is the flashback. The writer or the narrator is going back in time from his current time period to go back, and this is indicating that he is going to reflect on a certain event in his life. So that kind of is like a flashback. Not necessarily if he doesn't come back to the present time, right? The whole story is told in past tense, so you know that he's gone back. But sometimes flashbacks happen within the story, like he was 7 years old then, and then he went back further back to prior days or prior years. That would be another flashback. Then you have foreshadowing. Here you have, I was in love with a little girl named Helen Tucker. Right away, we know something's going to happen dealing with Helen Tucker. And sure enough, a few paragraphs down the line, he tells us, I would have gotten over Helen Tucker, but then this happened. Right? That something happened that in that classroom that made her face hang in front of me for the next 22 years. So future time, he's still thinking about Helen because of what happened here. When I played drums in high school, it was for Helen. When I broke track records in college, it was for Helen. And when I started standing behind microphones and heard applause, I wish Helen could hear it too. It wasn't until I was 29 years old and married and making money that I finally got her out of my system. Helen was sitting in that classroom when I learned to be ashamed of myself. So this is foretelling the event that's going to happen, right? So notice here, he goes back to present time. This is why this is a flashback. The whole story is told in flashback. But here, this is a reflection of the current man that he is. He went back and he reflected. He realized that it wasn't until he was 29 that he got rid of Helen Tucker. All right, so this is told in present time, this reflection. So this is why this is coming back from that flashback, okay? But also foretelling the future events that he's going to tell about Helen. All righty. Any questions so far? I'm going pretty quickly here. Any question, do post them in the comments, in the chat box, or give it an okay. Are you understanding this? Are we getting this? All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Here we have another element of narrative. Okay, you want to use, I went too far. Okay. You want to use transition words and phrases that help you move from sentence to sentence, that help you indicate a shift or a change in the time frame or a setting, or even in the syntax of the text, even in the grammar, all right? You want to indicate moving forward. And I'm going to go back real quick to this paragraph here. When I played the drums, okay, we don't know what time period was that, but then when I broke track records in college, Okay, so then here we have high school, then we have college. So you see how it's progressing in his lifetime. When I was standing behind microphones, he was a stand-up comedian. So this is already his career. So then here we have a progression, and they're all indicated by the transitional word when. Okay, so these words will help you move forward in your timeline. Sometimes they're different. Like, I guess I would have gotten over Helen. That's a transitional phrase. He's going to tell us, okay, this paragraph is about a reflection. Just like this paragraph. I never learned hate at home. That's another reflective paragraph. Okay. And then he goes back to the story, and then those transitions change back to the story. I'll show you some in just a minute. So transitional phrases and transitional words help you signal some changes that are coming in the story. You want to know where the story is going next? Look at the first 3 words or first phrase in that paragraph, and it'll tell you this paragraph is about this, or it's going in this direction. Okay, so transitional phrases become really important. Here are some. They show ideas, how they are connected. They communicate organization, and they are stepping stones that help the reader move right along from one idea to the next. And they're as simple as the fanboys, or they're more complex as adverbs and conjunctive adverbs, transitional expressions like the ones that I just showed you. Okay. However, moreover, therefore, nevertheless, on the other hand, things like that. Okay. Use precise words and phrases, relevant descriptive details, and sensory language. All right. Sensory language is very important because it helps the writer recreate an experience for the reader. Okay. It's like if I were to plug in, I wish I could just plug in a USB and you could see the video in my head, and it sounds ridiculous, but you can do that with words. You can describe it to that extent where the reader can see it. There is the thing called a mind's eye. And in your mind, you see things happening. It's like, for example, when you had a discussion with someone and you didn't get to say everything you wanted to say. And then later at night in bed, you're thinking, I should have said this. And then you play the scenario in your head, like how you would have said it, and then how that person might have responded. And you go back and forth in your mind. Okay, that's happening in your mind. Your imagination is going through that. And you can recreate that experience. Writers have those conversations. And, writers might look a little crazy sometimes when they're talking in their head. A writer can spend hours just sitting there staring at the wall, and then they're not really staring at the wall. They're thinking, having these conversations in their minds. And and that's what some writers do. I mean, I personally, when I write a story, I go through that. I'll sit in bed or wherever I'm at, I'm cooking, and my mind just takes off. Okay, then I come back and I write it down. These conversations are happening, but how can I make my reader see what's happening in my brain? By recreating the story through sensory language. I want you to see what I see in my mind. I want you to smell the smells that are in my mind, and the sounds and the feels and everything. Okay. So how can I do that? I'm going to use adjectives, words that describe things, words that tell when, where, and how, to what degree. Did I say something was hot? Well, is it like valley hot weather, like 110 degrees outside right now? Or is it hot like, summer in Alaska, 70, 60? What kind of hot is it? If you say it was a hot sunny day, well, is it a hot sunny day in Arizona and Texas? Or is it a hot sunny day in Alaska? They do have sunny days, and they do have hot. To them, it's hot, right? So adjectives, words that tell to what degree. How hot is it? Is it like burning hot, scalding hot, where you step outside and put your foot in the ground, and then you're barefoot and the concrete burns your foot? That kind of hot. Okay. So sensory language becomes really important. What do you see? What do you hear, taste, smell, feel? Okay. Here's an example from the text. So if I can have a volunteer to read this, just to change up the tone here. Anybody? Okay. No volunteers? Let me see. Who can I volunteer? Okay, Francisco. Oh, Kristen. Well, Andy, since you volunteered someone, thank you, Andy. Take it away.
I'm illiterate, miss.
Oh, come on.
I'm illiterate, I swear.
Okay, let's have somebody volunteer. Just real quick. Let me put that up back up. Oh, wrong PowerPoint. Sorry. Here goes.
Wait,
Just
Miss,
read
are
the
we
paragraph,
reading it or what?
please. Thank you.
I'll read it. The pipes were frozen again. There was no water in the house, but I washed my socks and shirt every night. I'd get a pot and go over to Mr. Ben's grocery store and stick my pot down into his soda machine and scoop out some chopped ice. By evening, the ice melted to water for washing. I got sick a lot that winter because the fire would go out at night before the clothes were dry. In the morning, I'd put them on, wet or dry, because they were the only clothes I had.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right. So if you notice here, this is a very simple paragraph. There's no fancy vocabulary here. If you notice, like, this isn't like, academic, jargon that, you have to go look up words in the dictionary. This is very simple language. But notice that there are some very descriptive images there. First of all, the pipes were frozen again. That phrase alone tells us the kind of weather that he's living in, right? This isn't the, if you say, well, it was really cold. Well, is it like valley cold again? Like 70 degrees, Christmas time, and still just barely 70? It was the kind of cold that pipes freeze. That's like 40s, 50s, and 30s, the kind that you have to leave the water running. So this gives you an experience like, hey, it's so cold, you have to like leave the water running, right? So some of us have experienced that kind of cold. So there's that relation. That phrase helps me relate and understand, oh, okay, that's what it means. And he did that through sensory language. I can see the pipes frozen, or I can feel them. There was no water in the house. At some point in your life, you probably have experienced no water in the house. Things happen, a pipe bursts down the street and they cut off the water. You know what that's like. So there's again that relation, bringing it to life by connecting with us on an experience that we've had. Just checking the time here. So then you have the next phrase, but I wash my socks and shirt every night. So that gives us an insight into his life and what kind of life he had. What kind of person washes their socks and shirt every night? Only a person that needs to do it, right? Someone that may not have a second pair. So that tells us again an insight how poor he is. He only has that pair of socks and that shirt. So next you have, I get a pot and go over Mr. Ben's grocery store and stick my pot into his soda machine and scoop out some chopped ice. So through this very descriptive sentence, we see him doing that. So again, sensory language, we see him doing that. We know a soda machine. We can see him scooping out. By evening, the ice melted to water for washing. I got sick a lot that winter because the fire would go out at night before the clothes were dry. Okay, so here's an interesting phrase, one that you may or may not relate to. If you've slept next to a fireplace on a cold night and the fire goes out and it's really cold, you're gonna wake up to smelling like smoke. Have you ever gone camping and then like you sleep by the fire and you wake up to the smell of smoke and the fire gone, right? So what he's telling me here is that the fire would go out eventually at night and the clothes would not dry. He doesn't have a dryer. He can't put the clothes on the line because it's that cold, they will freeze. And then he wakes up in the morning and he puts them on wet or dry. You ever put on wet clothes? I mean, could happen to anybody, right? Your mom forgot to put the clothes in the dryer at night, and then you have to dry it in the morning, and it's not ready by the time you have to leave, but you still put it on. You go to school, and you're cold because the clothes is still wet. That's the kind of clothes that he's been wearing all day, every day. So again, these experiences or these phrases have trigger memories for us that we can relate and we can see happening. So by Gregory doing that in the text, he's getting a reaction from us. I can relate to smelling like fire, sleeping next to a fireplace. I can relate to that. When I go visit my in-laws, they have a fireplace. We wake up to smelling like smoke. That's what it is. Okay, so some of us can relate to that, by the campfire or whatever the case. Those little words there, fire, frozen, water in the house, trigger experiences for the reader to relate and to see and think and feel what Gregory is going through. Okay? Any questions so far?
No.
Thank you. So notice how he's bringing this whole text to life with very simple vocabulary. All right. The next thing that I want to focus on, and this one is huge, is the metaphor. Okay. These are some terms that we should know already. And these are some terms that writers use, just a few of the many that you can choose from. But I want to bring my attention to the metaphor. The metaphor is a simple comparison between two things that are not alike. Without using the words like or as, right? So here we have an example of that. This is again from the story, and he's describing, how the teacher felt about him. He said, the teacher thought I was stupid, couldn't spell, couldn't read, couldn't do arithmetic. Just stupid. Teachers were never interested in finding out that you couldn't concentrate because you were hungry. You were so hungry because you hadn't had any breakfast. All you could think about was noontime. Would it ever come? Maybe you could sneak into the cloakroom and steal a bite of some kid's lunch out of a coat pocket, a bite of something. Paste. Notice that one word, one sentence. We'll talk about that later. You can't really make a meal out of paste or put it in a bread for a sandwich. But sometimes I scoop a few spoonfuls out of a big jar in the back of the room, pregnant people get strange tastes. I was pregnant with poverty. And here's that metaphor. Pregnant with dirt and pregnant with smells that made people turn away. Pregnant with cold and pregnant with shoes that were never bought for me. Pregnant with 5 other people in my bed and no daddy in the next room. I'm pregnant with hunger. Paste doesn't taste too bad when you're hungry. All right, so here's a really, really interesting metaphor that quickly turns into an analogy. An analogy is also kind of like a metaphor, but he's using this comparison to prove his point. All right. I also want to point out a very short sentence. This is called the dramatically short sentence. In this case, it's only one word. Paste. Paste, if you're not familiar, it's glue. And some glue has gluten in it. It has flour. So he would eat glue for lunch. That's what he's doing. Okay. And he puts it in a one sentence to draw attention. Hey, a bite of something, paste. This is what I had for breakfast. This is what I had for lunch, glue. All right. Now I want to bring my attention to I was pregnant with poverty. Okay. When you put in a metaphor or a comparison of any kind in your writing, you are telling the reader to apply the qualities of whatever it is you're comparing to the thing that you're comparing it to. So if I say, for example, she was a beautiful flower, or she is a flower. If I say that, she is a flower, then I would say something like, well, what qualities of the flower can I use to describe her? What other qualities can I apply to her? Well, okay, maybe I mean that she is fragile, like a flower, or that she needs attention, like a flower, or that she is delicate, like a flower. She's beautiful and attractive, like a flower. Does that make sense? So now, why is Gregory using the metaphor of a pregnant woman? He's the boy. Why is he using this particular comparison? I want you to think about that for a minute. Any ideas? Speak up, please. Why the comparison? Why being
He's
pregnant?
filled with it.
He's what?
He's like filled with poverty and like dirt.
Okay, very good. Yeah, he's filled with it, right? You look at a pregnant woman, she's filled. What else?
Pregnant women like crave stuff, and he's craving to like not be in poverty anymore.
Okay, very good, Jenny. Yes, very good. The cravings. I go back to, hey, he's eating paste, right, for lunch. Out of the need, like pregnant women need to eat those cravings. There's no way around it. They just crave it and they gotta have it, right? What else? If you're shy to speak out, just type it in the chat box.
You're stuck with it?
Ah, very good, Devin. You're stuck with it. All right. And what's more, it's for a long time, right? If you think about it, you're stuck with it. It is what it is. It's what it is. They go through slot. Slot? What do you mean? What are you trying to say? A lot? A lot. Okay. They go through a lot. Okay, yes. They have all kinds of sufferings, right? The morning sickness, the getting dizzy, the nauseous, the vomiting, the pains, the heaviness, the gaining weight, and all that process. Very good. Yes, they go through all that. But more importantly, nobody else has yet said it, is that it's so obvious, right? I only have 5 minutes. Okay, so it's so obvious you can't hide it. And what's more is that you have a product. You're a product, and that's what he's saying is, I'm a product of poverty. You can't hide it. That's what I am what I am. It is what it is. Okay, so there's that comparison. Look into it more, think about it, right? This is a really interesting one. And think about the metaphors, the kinds of metaphors that you want to use in your own writing. Okay, here he talks about pregnant with dirt, and we talked about the smells. Maybe he smells like fire, and he is dirty because, wet clothes attracts dirt. And, pregnant, you can't hide it. You can't. Everyone can see. And maybe he's ashamed of that. Some pregnant women are ashamed. Okay. Finally, I have 5 minutes to get through this real quick. If in your stories, you need to have one element that is going to tie all of your writing together. In writing, we call this the spine. So I'm just going to grab a little book here and show you something. A spine holds a book together. Literally, it holds the book together. This right here is called a spine. These are the, of course, the cover of the book. But in the cover of the book, the middle part is called the spine. And usually the title goes in the spine because the title is what holds the story together. All right. So in writing, you need to have a particular component in your writing that is going to bring you back full circle. And let me show you how Gregory did just that. In his conclusion, he reflects on the narrated experience, brings it full circle. Okay, so let's get back to that. I'm going to just show you the full story just so that you can see what I mean. All right, so here we have all throughout, this is the story. All throughout, he started with Helen Tucker. I was in love with little girl Helen Tucker. Okay, so this name becomes the important individual in his life that ties this whole story together. Okay, throughout the whole story, this story becomes really important because she was in it. She was part of this humiliation. She was part of that moment when he experienced shame. So everywhere, everybody's got a Helen Tucker, a symbol of everything you want. Okay, Helen here, Helen there, everywhere, everywhere. Now, something interesting happens. After he has that interchange with her and We scroll down. Helen Tucker turned around right after he was humiliated. If you read on, you see that the teacher humiliated and said, "We know you don't have a daddy," right? And Helen Tucker turned around, her eyes full of tears. She felt sorry for me. Then I couldn't see her too well because I was crying too. Okay. So this moment became really important because he did not want that feeling from her. He liked her. He wanted to be loved by her, not felt that she felt sorry for him. Right. So then later on, this is, I think, the last time that he talks about Helen. But at the very end, in the very reflective moment, if you read that conclusion, he says, "Yeah, the whole world heard the teacher that day. We all know you don't have a daddy." And he means two things here. First, the whole world. Everybody knew. He was humiliated in front of the whole class. But more importantly, his whole world heard it. Helen. All right? We know that she is his whole world, even up to when he's 29 years old and he's still thinking about her. Okay, right here. When I played drums in high school, when I was married, right? This whole section right here, all about Helen. She was his whole world. Okay, so Helen becomes the element that ties the whole narrative together. He keeps coming back to it. And even if he doesn't mention her by name, we know what he means. His whole world was Helen. Okay, so when you write your story, think about what could be the tie, what could be the spine of your story, what is going to bring that whole story full circle. All right, so here are just a recap of the lesson. Tell a story, write the events in order. Remember, you can plot diagrams. Use proper grammar and capitalization. Okay, all righty. Any questions? We're out of time here. Yes.
I have a question. Who are we writing to? Like, who's our audience?
You get to decide that. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And part of the free writing, you'll get to decide who the audience is. You could say me, but I would say something like your peers, the rest of the world. It could be a very specific audience. You can write it for someone you love, or you can write it for a general audience. And of course, that will determine what you write. It's a very good question. The prompt is already up on Blackboard. You could take a look at it. The prompt is actually what led you to be here, what caused you to be here right here in this class, an advanced class. You're a sophomore, most of you, 1301. What caused you to be here? What brought you here? And there's some pre-writing things that will help you decide that, okay? Alrighty, any other questions, guys, before we go? Yes, you do have to submit a draft before the final. You'll have time to do that. We'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen real quick.
I'm looking for where we submit the essay. I can't find it.